It was an ordinary day in Tokyo when I first noticed something odd about my Shiba Inu, named Kuro. We were living on the 23rd floor of a sleek high-rise apartment building, a place where the hustle and bustle of the city below always seemed distant, even though it was just a few meters away. Kuro, with his trademark curled tail and confident stance, had always been a mischievous dog. But this particular day, I sensed there was something new going on in his curious mind. I had always considered Kuro to be clever, but I had never seen him like this before. He was pacing near the elevator, his head tilted slightly as he watched the metal doors open and close, over and over. The elevator was a part of our daily routine, of course. It's the only way to get to the lower floors, but today, Kuro was watching it with an intensity I hadn't seen before. At first, I thought maybe he was just intrigued by the noise or movement. Dogs often find strange things fascinating, like the way the wind pushes against the glass or the reflections in the windows. But Kuro wasn't acting like his usual self. He was not just staring, he was observing. I laughed to myself, assuming he would get bored soon, as dogs often do with fleeting interests. But as the day went on, Kuro seemed more fixated than ever. Every time I opened the door to our apartment, he rushed over to the elevator, tail wagging in what I could only describe as anticipation. It wasn't like him to show this much interest in an object. Kuro had always been more into running outside or playing with his toys, but the elevator was starting to become the center of his attention. And then, it happened. One evening, I was getting ready to go down to the lobby. As usual, I pressed the elevator button and waited for the doors to open. To my surprise, Kuro darted ahead of me and, as the doors opened, stepped inside before I could even react. I quickly followed, thinking he was just trying to follow me like he always did, but what happened next was nothing short of incredible. Kuro, standing on his hind legs, tapped the elevator's down button with his paw. I froze, staring at him in disbelief. Had he just understood how to operate the elevator? I blinked and looked at the control panel, but it was impossible. There was no way he could have pressed the button by mistake. Kuro was standing still, watching the lights as they flickered, one by one, before the elevator started its descent. I stood there in stunned silence, still processing what I had just witnessed. The elevator moved smoothly, and after a brief moment, it stopped at the lobby. The doors opened, and Kuro stepped out, tail still wagging, as if he had been on this journey many times before. I followed him out, half in awe and half in confusion, trying to make sense of it. For the rest of that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was going on. Kuro, as intelligent as he was, had always figured out tricks. How to open doors, fetch things, and even push buttons on the TV remote, much to my amusement. But the elevator? That was a whole new level. The next morning, I decided to test it again, unsure of what exactly Kuro might do. I was determined to see if he would try the same trick. We were heading to the parking garage for a walk when, once again, Kuro trotted confidently toward the elevator. This time, I hesitated for a second before following him inside. As soon as the doors closed, Kuro looked at the control panel, his paws hovering above the buttons. I was about to stop him, thinking it had been a one-time fluke, when, sure enough, his paw landed on the button that would take us to the second floor. The elevator hummed to life, and we began our ascent. I was stunned. How had he learned this? Had he been watching the elevator operator, or was he simply mimicking what he had seen me do over the past few months? Either way, it was clear that Kuro was more than just a curious dog. He was becoming a master of the elevator. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Kuro was not just acting on instinct. There was a method to his behavior. Each time we stepped into the elevator, he seemed to know exactly what to do. If he was feeling particularly playful, he would tap the up button, wanting to visit a higher floor. If he wanted a change of scenery, he would press the down button and head to the lobby or the parking garage. Soon, it wasn't just a one-off occurrence. Every day, without fail, Kuro would try his paw at the elevator, exploring different floors of the building with a sense of purpose I had never expected from a dog. I would often catch him happily trotting off to the 10th floor to say hello to a neighbor, or sometimes heading to the 15th floor where the view of the city skyline seemed to fascinate him. It became clear that Kuro was not only enjoying the ride but was actually seeking out new places to visit. He had discovered the elevator as his personal transportation system, and every day felt like an adventure. He had become the building's unofficial elevator dog. But the real fun started when Kuro began to realize he could control the stops. He learned which buttons to press to go to the floors he wanted, and with each new day, his confidence grew. He wasn't just along for the ride, he was the one navigating the journey. It didn't take long for the building's residents to take notice. People would step into the elevator and smile when they saw Kuro standing at the controls, waiting patiently for the doors to open. Some would even greet him as if he were a regular elevator operator, chuckling at the thought of a dog being so clever. And yet, even as his fame grew among the residents, I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. How had Kuro figured this out? Was it his natural curiosity and intelligence, or was there something deeper at play? Could it be that my dog had mastered the art of navigating the complex system of floors in a Tokyo high-rise? I wasn't sure, but one thing was for certain. Kuro had turned the elevator into his personal playground, and I was just along for the ride. As Kuro's elevator escapades continued, it became clear that his fascination with the building's floors was more than just a passing interest. He had transformed the elevator into his daily routine, and what had started as a single ride had grown into a fully fledged adventure. At first, it was charming to see him so excited about visiting different floors. But soon, his behavior started to evolve. The residents of the building, many of whom were used to the predictable rhythms of high-rise living, began to notice Kuro's daily trips more and more. And in a way, he became the unofficial mascot of the building. People would start to take pictures of him, laughing as they shared stories of the clever dog who had learned to operate the elevator. Some days, Kuro would jump into the elevator with me, his tail wagging in anticipation. Other days, I would find him standing in front of the elevator doors, waiting for someone to take him on his journey. He'd press the button for a random floor, then happily disembark at the next stop, clearly enjoying the thrill of each new destination. It was as though the world inside the elevator was his to command, and each ride was a new chapter in his day. But what I didn't realize at first was how Kuro's sense of adventure was starting to become contagious. I had heard from the building's staff that residents had begun to notice his presence, and some were starting to join in on his fun. They would see Kuro waiting at the elevator, often offering a scratch behind the ears or a quick pat on the head, before stepping inside with him. Kuro, of course, was always ready to greet them, excited for the company and more than happy to share his elevator adventures. One day, as I was heading down to the lobby with Kuro in tow, a curious thing happened. A couple, who had just moved into the building, stepped into the elevator with us. They smiled at Kuro, clearly amused by the dog who had somehow learned how to press the buttons. The man jokingly said, "I heard this dog is the best elevator operator in the building. Think he'll take us to the top?" Kuro, as if on cue, trotted over to the control panel and, with his usual precision, pressed the button for the top floor. I chuckled at the timing, but the couple was even more amused. They exchanged surprised glances as the elevator smoothly ascended, with Kuro standing proudly by the control panel, his eyes fixed on the flashing floor numbers. "Do you think he knows which floor he's going to?" the woman asked, still laughing. "I think he knows exactly what he's doing," I replied with a grin. "He's been doing this for a while now." As the elevator reached the top floor, the doors opened, and Kuro stepped out confidently, his tail still wagging. The couple followed, chuckling as they marveled at the dog's apparent understanding of the elevator's operation. At that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully grasped before. Kuro wasn't just taking these rides for fun anymore. He had become a kind of social connector, bringing people together through his adventures. In a city as busy and fast-paced as Tokyo, it was easy for people to get lost in their own worlds, stuck in the routines of their daily lives. But Kuro, with his simple yet endearing antics, had created a new kind of community within the building. His elevator rides were no longer just about the destination, they were about the shared experience of getting there. As the days went on, Kuro's fame spread throughout the building. I began receiving more and more messages from neighbors, some of whom would share stories of their own elevator encounters with my clever dog. Kuro took me all the way to the 16th floor this morning, just because I was wearing a red scarf, one neighbor joked. Another told me, "I swear Kuro knows when I need a little pick-me-up. He always comes by when I am feeling down." It wasn't just the residents who were charmed by Kuro's antics. The building's management staff, who were initially skeptical about a dog operating the elevator, had started to appreciate his role in the building's dynamic. They'd often stop by to check on Kuro, making sure he was behaving well, and more than once, I caught them laughing as they watched him press the buttons with his paw, his eyes glinting with mischief. But even with all the attention Kuro was getting, he never seemed to let it go to his head. He continued to treat the elevator like his own personal adventure. Some days, he would visit the lobby and spend time with the building's concierge, who had grown fond of him. On other days, he'd hop on and off at random floors, as if he were trying to keep his routine fresh and exciting. He loved the variety, the different faces, the new spaces he could explore. It was also fascinating to me how Kuro seemed to remember certain floors. He would often pause at the door of the 10th floor, where an elderly woman lived who always had a treat waiting for him. He'd press the button for that floor and sit patiently, as if he knew exactly what was coming. The woman, who had never been much of a dog person, had grown fond of Kuro and often spoiled him with biscuits, much to his delight. But the most surprising thing to me was that Kuro had never made a mistake. In all his travels, not once did he press the wrong button. Every time we entered the elevator, he chose his destinations with remarkable accuracy, and it was clear that his confidence in navigating the building was growing. It was almost as if he had mapped the entire building in his mind and knew exactly where to go. One afternoon, as we were heading down to the lobby, I decided to take a break from letting Kuro press the buttons. I wanted to see if he would still have the same enthusiasm without the ability to control the elevator. I gently nudged him away from the control panel and pressed the button for the ground floor myself. To my surprise, Kuro didn't protest. He sat calmly by my side, his eyes following the flashing numbers on the display. It was as though he knew that, for that moment, I was in charge of the journey. But I could see the wheels turning in his mind. His gaze flickered toward the control panel, and I knew that, sooner or later, he'd be back at the controls again. Kuro's elevator adventures continued for months, and with each new floor, each new ride, he became more and more confident in his role as the building's unofficial elevator operator. He wasn't just a dog anymore, he was a part of the building's heart and soul, a small but vital link connecting the people who lived there. It wasn't just the residents who had changed, it was Kuro, too. He had grown from a curious dog into a savvy, social creature who had turned the mundane elevator ride into something special, something to look forward to. And I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride every time I saw Kuro trotting confidently into the elevator, ready to explore the next floor, ready to make a new friend, ready for his next adventure. And so, each day, without fail, Kuro continued to press the buttons, explore new places, and bring joy to those around him. The building had its quiet moments, but thanks to Kuro, it also had something extraordinary, an elevator dog with a heart full of curiosity and a spirit of adventure.